to get a cup of coffee or tea, please feel free to go outside and take it and bring it back to the room. And then we will serve you the lunch at the rooftop. We'll take a staircase. No, it's not a penthouse. It's a rooftop. We call it here Bumbung Shah Alam. Just take a staircase to the rooftop. We will serve the lunch there. For those who are new here, we have a mix of regulars and some new people, new faces here. For those who are not aware, the restroom is just behind this screen. So you walk out from the room, turn to the left. The first one was the gents, the ladies is toward the end. Our prayer room, you walk out from the room, turn to the left and then turn to the right, just next to the door, next to the lift lobby. That's our prayer room. Other than that, I think our facilities is quite straightforward. Be reminded that parking here is by coupon. So for those who have not placed their coupon, please do so, because MBSA is quite active around this area. They know because IDCC is just next door. Normally they have programs for Dr. Azizan Osman, those who want to be rich. So they think those people are rich also. So they are quite active doing rounds here. I believe our staff downstairs at the counter still have the coupons for you. If you need some of them, please feel free to get assistance from them. Other than that, I think I will pass to Dr. Saifuddin. If you need assistance, we have our staff here, Sadar Suhairi, taking care of the camera. We have Naza, we have Haris, myself, Cik Bahrain, and Cik Khairul Arifin will be around to assist you. With that, I'll pass to Dr. Saifuddin the session. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum. Is it working? Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Brother Saifuddin. First and foremost, I would like to welcome all to. This is the second roundtable organized by the center at IDE. We are of course very delighted to have all of you here, the keynote speakers, the commentators, and friends from the media, and also friends from the foreign, from the diplomatic corps who are present here. I think it is only proper if at the beginning of this roundtable, if we recognize the people present. I'm sure you all know Professor Shaharuddin. He is with IDE, a political scientist by definition, a politician. An academic by a political scientist by definition, an academic by profession, a politician in the making. Or already there, almost there. Okay, so yeah. Dr. Johan Saravanamuttu, the Dean of Political Science for Malaysia, was a professor at USM, has also served a few other international organizations here and afar, and recently and most currently today as Adjung Senior Fellow at RSIS in Singapore. His masterpiece, okay, is this book which I'm promoting. Power Sharing in the Divided Nation. It's a must read if you want to be a politician or a political analyst in this country. I prove him that I've read it by showing him all the lines and the comments that I've made. Okay. The second keynote speaker is Dr. Beng, who from about 5 months ago is the CEO of Penang Institute. Previously, he was, 13, 15, 14 years in Singapore, in ICIS Singapore, nowadays known as Isyas Yusof Ishaq Institute in Singapore. A leading scholar in social science, has published many books too. Now I want to make everybody jealous. I just got his PhD dissertation, which is very interesting. And you will see from the two speakers, the terminologies that they are using, not opposing terminologies, but is complementing, and I think it's well calculated, well thought terminologies. You will listen. I won't steal the thunder from the speakers. We have Dr. Mazli Malik, celebrity political scientist. Okay. Has written a number of books, including The Foundation of Islamic Governance, published by Rolex. I'm told it's out of stock, so please tell them to reprint. The problem is very costly. Rolex publication is always very, very costly. We have Dr. Mujahid Yusof Rawa, very progressive, I won't use the term liberal, very progressive-minded Islamic politician, Muslim politician, Islamist, Muslim Democrat, also quite prolific in his writings. And I think most people would remember he is one of the few Muslim politicians who actually engaged in real dialogue with Christians in the real sense of the word. Dr. Ong Kian Ming, academician turned politician, an ardent marathon runner. He runs anytime. He can complete 10 kilometers within less than 40 minutes. So any one of you, yeah, being humble, still being very humble, but definitely below 50 minutes. So, so that should be your KPI, especially the young one like Adli and Sophia, Diana. You want to challenge Kian Ming? Your target must be minimum 50 minutes, or maximum 50 minutes for 10 kilometers. The de facto Minister of Transport for the AP. just joking. Dr. Helen Ting is of course an academic from UKM. She is a senior fellow at ICMAS, has also been publishing books and journals, but I think she brings with her to this table this morning. Well, I really don't know what she will be presenting, but she is among the academics in UKM and also outside UKM who a couple of years back started writing about challenging the race paradigm, right now, Helen? In as far as, well, at least that's the title of the book that you co-write, in as far as research is concerned. Those are the people who are our speakers, but I also want to recognize, I must apologize if I cannot pronounce certain names properly or if I can't remember some of the names. Yeah, we have Asri, we have Asri, okay, we have Abdul Halim Ismail. Abdul Halim Ismail is from Wadah or from Abim or from Darul Hikmah? Wadah, from Wadah, okay. So alumni of Abim. Okay. Asri is also from Wadah, okay. But I will talk about Halim a little bit later on during the presentation. There's a reason why he's here. Adli Zakwan is from Pusat Kommas. Diana Sophia, next Member of Parliament for Teluk Intan. Very confident, very confident. Dr. Hamdan from UNICEL, Political Science. Our friend from Pusat Kommas. Ferrybell from Pusat Kommas. Yeah. Ini Sheikh, Allahu Akbar. Tarmizi from Perak. Wow. If I forget his name again, I can be banned from Perak. One of my senior brothers in Perak. Sheikh Jaafar, also from Perak. Fadil. Club Jaringan Rakyat. Thank you. We have Haji Kahar from Asrawani. Yes. Ananta from Writers. Thank you. Helmi, you are a student. Are you representing PKPIM? Okay. Huh? PKPIM, National Union of Malaysian Muslim Students. Okay, thank you. FGIS, yep. Please, later on, please, during the discussion, introduce to us FGIS. FGIS is marvelous. I mean, it's awesome. Yep. Thank you, thank you. Farid is a trainer, started with Petronas, now on your own. He's a professional, a licensed trainer in a number of fields, but do a lot of training, still doing training for Petronas. Rufdi from Singapore High Commission. Sorry, I missed your name. Yeah, I got your name from His Excellency Vanu. Yeah, Shannon Teo, local boy representing Straits Times Singapore. No wonder. Brother Khidir from FMT, Dr. Adil, the handsome son of still handsome father, Dr. John. Okay. Do I miss anyone? Okay, we have Saifuddin, we have Carol Arifin, head office. Saifuddin is our chief of staff. Carol Arifin is head of research. Kamaru Bahrain, head of publication. He there. Brother Yusmadi, former MP of Balik Pulau, now political secretary to Dr. Wan Aziza. Can I have your Mr. Chiliong from Oriental Daily. Rizal from Sinar Harian. So Sinar Harian ada dua sekali. Your neighbor. Okay. Okay, all right. Do I miss anyone? Okay. All right. To start the ball rolling, this is Mr. Ong from the World. No, we were introducing everybody. Yeah. Okay.
From BIM.
Okay, all right. Okay, to start the ball running, before we invite the two speakers, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Shaharuddin to say a few words of welcome to everyone. Sila.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to Dato Saifuddin Abdullah as the chairman of the Center for Nation Building Studies, Institute of Ehsan, and both of the main speakers for today, and then the other speakers from the political parties and also from the universities, and all the participants of this roundtable discussion. I just want to say salam from Dato Kamrin Jafar. He has some family commitment that he cannot come today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I just want to introduce what do you mean by institutional Ehsan. This is some kind of a think tank established 2 years ago by the state of government, but we act independently. Although there is some accusation saying that we got all these financial helps definitely from the state of government with certain objective. Okay, and for this particular 2 years, we have organized a lot of academic programs such as this roundtable discussion, seminar, and convention, just to make sure that, for instance, we can give some kind of input to the Selangor government, especially. Okay? But the centerpiece of this Institute of Ehsan is actually basically depends on our chairman. Our chairman is Professor Dr. Ustaz Siddiq Fadil, and our CEO is the Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Ridwan Osman. He cannot make it for today because he's on the way from Turkey. And also Siddiq Fadil because he's preparing some working paper for the seminar this Saturday. This Saturday, Amanah has a program down here in terms of seminar of education. Definitely, he's the prime speakers during this time. Besides that, one of the main things that we want to develop definitely is the issues of maqasid Sharia. Okay. Besides doing a lot of research in terms of survey studies, we have concluded what you call it as the mood of the nation. So we have certain findings of that, and maybe not today that we can discuss this thing, because basically today will be a roundtable discussion on certain political thought. But we did a survey not only in throughout Malaysia but also specifically in Selangor, because definitely we need to give some inputs of certain mood of the people, say in Selangor especially, and also in Kelantan, because there are certain things that we need to develop, especially between Selangor and Kelantan for the last 4 or 5 months ago. So this is one of the objectives of this Institute Al-Ehsan, and definitely every day we have programs of this kind of nature, and we would like to gather all the academicians and the political scientists come, academician, and definitely I'm very because today we have 2 gurus of the political science. Definitely everybody knows Dr. Dato or Beng of Penang Institute, and once you do a political science in PhD or political history, definitely you will meet all the literature by Dato. And also definitely the other gurus will be Dr. Johan Saravanamuttu. Definitely when I did my PhD on Malaysian politics, we made a lot of articles in journals from Dr. Johan. So that is the main purpose of organizing the Center for Nation Building, because we feel that the issues of nation buildings, the issues of terrorism, the issues of moderation, and also the multiracial is some kind of a crux in the context of Malaysian political system. Okay, so we in IDE want to welcome especially the participants of this roundtable discussion, and thank you for coming to this event. Definitely we have the Australian embassies, and Elizabeth from the Australian embassies. So we would like to gather all not only the academicians but the political practices, so that definitely we can come out from this roundtable discussion with truthful and also the open way of how Malaysia is doing things. Okay. Welcome you all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Shah. Brothers and sisters, let me welcome Elizabeth from the Australian High Commission. Before we go into the roundtable proper, please allow me 2 minutes just to set the setting, to give the setting of the roundtable. There are 2 projects that the center is initiating or starting to kickstart the actual work. And these 2 projects are, even if they are not exactly the 2 sides of the coin, but they are almost like the 2 sides of the coin. On the one side, we are trying to address some issues among the Islamic realm. There are at least 2 ways of looking at it. One is the heightened intolerance within Islamism, if you like. Within Islamism, if you like. I mean, I know you can debate the terminology later, but within. we have to settle that. Yeah. The other way of looking at it is, because Muslims are the majority in this country, Muslims have to know how to coexist peacefully and harmoniously better with non-Muslim. I will stop at that, yeah, because that will entail another debate altogether. So the project that we are running is called, okay, let's put it this way. We are trying to come up with the Malaysian version of Fiqh at-Ta'ayush as-Silmi. Fiqh or jurisprudence of coexistence, of peaceful coexistence. If you say there is a Muslim problem, yes, but we have to address it. We have to address it, yeah. We have to put a rest to all this story about, can a Muslim give salam to non-Muslim? What if Tian Chua gives salam? Do you answer wa alaikum salam, or you don't know what to answer? Can I pass my, can I give zakat to a non-Muslim? You know, we have to settle this issue. Yeah, those are simple examples. On the other side, we have to address multiculturalism, multiraciality, living together, as we are already living together. But we also understand there are levels of issues, and one of the levels is politics. The idea is, how do we address politics of race? I mean, to put it simply, how do we put a stop to politics of race? Hence, the topic of today's discussion, multicultural and moderate political thoughts. We know, we are wary of the fact that you don't develop thoughts in one round table. We know, it may take years to develop, but at least we want to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. In fact, we are not really starting from zero, because the two keynote speakers have already written about it. Ming has started, Mujahid has started, Mazli has started, Shaharuddin has started writing. We just have to connect the dots and put it into a project and then move forward from there. On the Fiqh at-Ta'ayush as-Silmi is led by Saudara Abdul Halim. Abdul Halim is leading a team of Islamist scholars and activists and what have you, trying to address that issues. I'm saying that openly here because some of you may be interested in trying to know what Halim is trying to do, and so on. Okay, those are just as a background to why we are here today. We have our two keynote speakers. Each of them have very kindly sent us their papers or their synopsis of their presentation. And without any delay, I would like to invite our guru, Dr. Johan. Each of them will be given about 20 minutes or so, followed by commentaries of 10 minutes or so by each of the speakers. Sila.
Assalamu alaikum, a very good morning to everybody. First of all, let me thank IDA and especially Dato Saifuddin for having invited me here to join you for this, I think, very, very important discussion about moderate political thought and multiracialism in Malaysia. I think we live in a particular time now where these issues are very pertinent and very prevalent in terms of discussions, and Malaysia is, in a sense, in the vertex of this sort of discussion, not just, even from the early days till now. I'll be a bit informal, I'm sorry, it's not really a speech, I've got a few talking points, which I think the organizers have circulated, so if you do want to glance at it, please, you're welcome to do so. So 20 minutes, I'll try to be brief. I think that moderation in political thinking is imperative in a multi-ethnic, multicultural social formation or nation state such as Malaysia. And of course this idea has been around for a long time. We've had political discussions and political philosophers who have delved deeply into this. Two political philosophers whom I particularly like are Will Kimlicka and Charles Taylor. They both happen to be Canadians. And they have actually delved deeply into the idea of multiculturalism as a absolute necessity for societies which are culturally divided. And they are Canadians, so Canada is a very culturally divided society as well. And in fact, I'm rather partial towards Canada as an example. I put it in my first paragraph. I lived in Canada for a good number of years as a graduate student in the mid-70s, and then separately as a visiting professor in Toronto. So if you've been to Toronto, you will realize how multicultural it is. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, more than 50% of the population of Toronto is non-white. So that's very interesting, isn't it? So as a concept, multiculturalism approaches nation building by accepting the notion that there is an idea of group rights. People of a particular community, of a particular group, and particularly minorities, do have rights, and those rights have to be guaranteed and represented in the political system. So that's a kind of a primary cardinal principle of multiculturalism. Of course, the manner in which this is actually manifested or carried out in terms of legal, requirements and so on would vary from state to state and so on. Canada itself is a practicing multicultural state. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the first country in the world to have actually introduced a Multiculturalism Act under Pierre Trudeau in 1971. So Canada's own history is that of biculturalism. I think you'll be familiar with that. The biculturalism in Canada referred to the fact that you had both the English and the French sectors of Canada. And they were very separate in terms of their political leanings, in terms of their political orientation, or especially in terms of culture and language. And so Canada, even up to today, practices bilingualism. So 2 official languages of Canada, as you know, as you might know, is English and French. So from that model of biculturalism, it moved on to the full-fledged multiculturalism, which was then embedded in this Act of 1971. Now, mind you, it's never without problems. Canada, much like Malaysia, also has not just migrant communities, what they call charter communities, which are the English and the French. They would call them Bumiputra, I suppose. But they're so-called original people, and they have the First Nations, who are very important, or Aboriginals. And interestingly, it's the only country in the world that I know of that has, I've got to be mindful of time, that has actually established a whole region for a minority, an originary or a native minority, the Inuit, whom we used to call Eskimos, in an area, and they've called the province Nunavut, which is they've carved out Northwest Territory and made it Nunavut and Northwest Territory in 1999. So this is the extent they would go in terms of establishing this principle of group rights, that you actually give a territory to a particular group. As far as I know, no such country has done it within a state, right? Of course, the latest flap, as you know, internationally is the Catalonia idea. Big problem. And it's affected football as well. Because the Barcelona, player, Piqué, stood up for the rights of Catalonians. And he's in trouble because of that with the rest of the Spanish population. So we live in this kind of world where we have multiculturalism everywhere. And although it has been a necessity to practice this in nation or national formations, it has, of course, been subject to a lot of criticism as well. The liberals have criticized it as being too much emphasis, that it has given too much emphasis on outcomes, or the equality of outcomes for groups, as opposed to the equality of opportunities. But at the very least, we should have an equality of opportunities for groups which exist, or minorities which exist in a state. The right-wing critique is a well-known one. Nobody absolutely should be given any kind of special rights. And that kind of populism, as you know, is becoming very prevalent with Trump, becoming prevalent with the new far-right groups that have emerged in the West. So multiculturalism is under a bit of an attack. in Western countries because of these new problems of ethnicity that have now surfaced in Europe and so on, and there is a swing a little bit to the center and even to the right, actually. Okay, so, but in terms of its actual validity as a narrative, a political narrative, and as a necessary practice, for most nations of the world, mind you, hardly any country of the world today is not diverse. Maybe Japan, Korea, North and South are the same, right? Well, I mean, in terms of culturally. Very few countries other than those two are actually not diverse. So there is the need to recognize diversity, a need to recognize the rights of minorities and the rights of majorities as well. So now we come to Malaysia. Malaysia, historically, has been multicultural. It has, even if you take it back before the British times, but I don't want to go that far, even in the Malay world situation, Malaysia was already multicultural. But definitely at the point of independence, at the point of the creation of the nation state, we had a multicultural state, and we indeed had a multicultural practice. Now, whether it was actually coalesced, or rather it was actually created sort of legally as a multicultural state, that remains a question mark. But certainly we had the practices of that. And in the Constitution of which is from 1957 onwards, that recognition is there. However, there are some who are very critical of Malaysia. People who are critical of Malaysia will say the government has bestowed, or the Malaysian state has bestowed, special rights or status to the majority, sons of the soil, or Bumi Putra, while arguably underprivileging historic migrant minority communities, Chinese and Indians, and even native communities, Orang Asal, Orang Asli. So there's that kind of imbalance, some people say. However, as I'm reading from here, the rights and cultural practices of minority communities have always been guaranteed by the Constitution, right? And all groups have some level of political representation. Now, my main point would be to say, to argue that as long as we have that recognition, we are able to maintain a level of ethnic coexistence, ethnic peace. So this is very necessary for us to have that. However, we still have to adjust from time to time, from different political moments to different political moments, the kind of multicultural practices and even the kind of laws that we have with regard to multiculturalism from time to time. And some of these adjustments have been made. In 1969, a kind of major adjustment was made. The NEP was pronounced. It was implemented. Now, all of these, I think, with its flaws, mind you, they're not perfect, have been important for maintaining a high level of ethnic peace. And at the heart of these policies, I think, has been moderation. At the heart of these policies. I mean, if you take it from the time of Tunku to the time of Tun Razak, all the way even to the days of Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, and one could argue right up to today under Najib, policies of moderation have been the bedrock of maintaining ethnic peace. However, as you all know, and I'm sure many of you will be discussing, many of these accepted practices and many of these moderated practices that we have embedded in our society are now fraying at the seams. We are reaching a point where we're beginning to see many of these practices being eroded. A great deal of talk now, as we all know, is around the issue that Dato Saifuddin talked about, Islam and how it's affected Malaysian society. But apart from Islam, which we are not discussing today, even in terms of ethnic relations, it's very clear that this kind of compact, we talk about a compact at the point of independence, the compact that we had, that particular compact itself is being shaken because of developments. So we are in a particular political moment, I think, where we need to address this sort of questions very, very seriously, and to come up with actual ideas. This forum is about ideas, and beyond ideas, actual policies and practices which are necessary to address these problems that are now emerging in Malaysian society. So the rest of my points are, as I mentioned, as I put in my paper, to talk a little bit about, to raise a question about the need for electoral balance, because in order for us to maintain this ethnic moderation and ethnic peace in a multicultural society, we have to have an electoral politics which also mirrors that moderation. Right? So far, so good. May 13, 1969, that was the major ethnic, break, the ethnic sort of a clash that took place. Since then, we have not had an equally devastating incident. We have many skirmishes. We've had many near misses, 1987 and so on. We've had Kampung Medan. So there have been many ethnic issues along the way. But the whole system of moderation has been maintained by what I call mediated communalism in the book that is on the table. I won't do a sell here, but basically the idea is that it is absolutely necessary.
That's the first term we are hearing today.
Mediated communalism. And what is mediated communalism based on? It is a concept that is based on consociationalism, and I will explain in a minute, and also centripetalism, or to the newer concept. Okay, so let me start with the notion of consociationalism. So in a way, the Malaysian state, and along with its electoral practices, has been based on the idea of elite cooperation among ethnic groups. That's called consociationalism. And that notion of consociationalism comes from a very famous political scientist, Arend Leibhard. He's from Netherlands. And it's a concept that's not just used in the third world or in divided societies in the third world, also in the West. For example, Belgium is an example where you have this. So the model basically says that if you have a plural society with different ethnic communities, now I'm simplifying it a bit, say you have Peninsular Malaysia, Malays, Chinese Indians as the main group, and others. But you would then have leaders of these communities coming together as elites in cooperating to build an alliance. And that happens at the political stage. And that also happens in terms of policies, because then the leaders can communicate with their followers, their communities, and bring up those matters which are most prevalent and most important to those communities. That way, you maintain ethnic peace, but the communities themselves don't interact, you see. So that's where the weakness of consociationalism is. Only the elites seem to interact, but not at the level of everyday community discussions. So that idea is slightly flawed, but it's good for politics, but it's flawed in a sense of being necessary for community building or nation building and integration. The idea of centripetalism is a little bit similar, but it comes from a man by the name of academic by the name of Benjamin Riley. Now his argument is, for ethnically divided societies and political systems, he's focusing on political systems, you have to move. Centrifugal is to move out, spin out. Centripetal is to move, spin inwards. You have to spin all your ideas and all your policies and actions into a middle, a center, which encompasses the largest group of your communities and largest group of your political actors. And I think that's a really very important idea. And the reason why you need that is you maintain stability by engaging in this center. So it's very important for political design of electoral systems. Electoral systems which tend to work towards building support at the center or pooling of votes in the center are more successful in maintaining stability and peace than those which tend to be centrifugal. that move outwards. Okay, that's the. And in a way, Malaysia's mediated communalism, which is a practice that has been around by the Alliance and by the Barisan Nasional, has been using, I think, both principles. So in my book, I argue, maybe in the early phases of our political practice, it has been basically consociationalism. Not much coordination at below. But at a later stage, there has been also more community engagement and so on, and the policies have become centripetal in the sense of aiming at a middle ground. Because you have the Barisan Nasional, which is, I can't remember now, about 13 parties now. It used to be 17. So you bring in everybody into a discussion, and therefore you maintain policies which are cross-sectional, cutting across the various cleavages. However, if one party dominates all the time, so my point is, going forward, what do we do? Going forward, if one party dominates all the time, there is a tendency for these kinds of moderate political policies to be eroded over time. Because once you become dominant, you can introduce policies which are favoring one side or the other. And that's what is happened, I would say. Because to cut a very long story short, 6 decades of alliance and BN rule has led to the situation that I talked about earlier. We are fraying at the seams. Because many of these policies of mediated communalism, consociationalism, and centripetalism are now being eroded or even disregarded by the ruling party or the ruling coalition. Okay? So we are now at a stage where we might need to change that. In some ways, this has happened with the electoral development of 2008 onwards until 2013, the last 2 elections. Because we have seen a parallel development in the opposition coalition, in the past known as Pakatan Rakyat and now known as Pakatan Harapan, even before that Barisan Alternative, which has tried to emulate the kind of policies that was followed by the Barisan Nasional in terms of moving towards a centripetal middle, but at the same time becoming more progressive in terms of its ethnic policies, in terms of its orientation towards ethnic rights, in terms of minority rights, in terms of religious rights, and also some criticism of the NEP, which is being skewed to one side. So that coalition of forces has been quite successful in taking the middle ground from the Barisan Nasional. And that, to me, is actually a very good development. I'm not being partisan here. It's a good development in terms of nationalism, in terms of national development, in terms of national integration. It allows for this competition for who has the better model for centripetalism or better model for moderation in political discourse and political practice. So without getting at, my time is getting a bit short now, and I have a few concluding points. Without going to another section which I call going forward, I'm suggesting that we should continue pushing for that kind of what political scientists call a turnover political system. As of now, we do not have it yet, not at the federal level. We have it at the state level. State governments have been changed, and state governments have remained there. The famous SP Huntington 2 turnovers test. You must win and you must stay there for one more term. Then the process is complete. You win once and you lose again, it's not complete. So in other words, if you want to have a turnover system, the Pakatan Harapan, the new opposition, has to win and also maintain that win or win in another round. So that gives us this balance. And I would just call it electoral balance. We need to have electoral balance to continue policies of political moderation. I have one last section, which is to talk about moderate political positioning and practices. And my points there are just a whole lot of laundry lists of things, actually, which is to say that we must, one of the major points, which is to say that we must, to maintain this moderate kind of positioning in Malaysia, there's some cardinal principles and cardinal practices that we must continue to have. And I would say one of the major ones, apart from the broad concept of multiculturalism, would be actually the consociational principle. The consociational principle is very important. That is, you have a mutual veto. A mutual veto, I think you know that, right? The mutual veto is the idea that all ethnic communities of note, of ethnic communities as part of this multicultural pact, must have the right to veto some policy or some action that is detrimental to that community. Okay, you don't have that, then your system will not have ethnic peace. That's very important. But the consociational principle only gives that right to elites. We must practice that at the level of community and everyday practices. So if a community in general feels that a particular imposition is wrong for them, that must be accepted, by the state. So that's one principle, I would say, for moderation. I have a few other ones here. The equal protection of groups in terms of group rights. I think we should introduce a law. I didn't say it in my paper. It's time that we have a kind of law which protects groups. I call it minority. I don't know what you want to call it. I think there have been Harmony Act. There has been this on the table. This act has not come into place yet. It's time to have this act. And people who offend or go against that Harmony Act have to be, hauled up to court. Okay, that's one. There's another one. Another principle that I would like to advocate is not so much a principle as a practice. It's what I call, and this is part of centripetalism. Centripetalism. It's called bridging institutions. So basically, institutions are of two sorts in society, which some are bonding, means to say you have Malay societies, you have Chinese societies, and civil society I'm talking about now, right? You have, Iban, Kadasan, and so on. That's fine. You bond together. It's very important that you maintain this cultural, bonding and so on. But beyond that, Malaysia also needs, we do have them, not that we don't have, bridging institutions. Institutions which cut across ethnicities and race. And of course, the term that has been around is civil society. Most civil society organizations in the world are bridging ones. But in Malaysia, we have a tendency to make them all bonding. Perkasa, all one side, So it's true of the other side as well. And I'm moving into a little bit to religion. Even in religion, unfortunately, we have the Interfaith Council, which is actually composed only of non-Muslims. All the Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists, and so on, I forget the name, is so long, but no Muslims. So that's not a proper interfaith bridging organization. We must have those things, which is all inclusive. So the second, I think, principle that I'd like to stress here in terms of moderate political thinking is inclusiveness and bridging institutions to bring about that inclusiveness. I think my time is about to run out. I will just end here and talk about two things, medium term and long term. In the medium term, I think we need to establish more accountability and independence of some institutions, such as I just picked out the Electoral Commission because we're talking about electoral politics, so that even the way in which, I don't have really much time to go into detail, even the way in which we design our political system, our electoral system, must work towards this ethnic peace. Unfortunately, there's a tendency for the electoral design, the way the constituencies are being redelineated. Notice the latest redelineation that's happening. Ong Kian Ming can tell us more about it. It's all trying to put more ethnic groups in one place. So the DAPCs are increasingly being filled up with more Chinese voters, and the Malay areas are majority filling up with more Malay voters. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's wrong in terms of creating a more multi-ethnic Malaysia. So we need to have institutions of authority such as Electoral Commission, which practice that moderation centripetalism, and work towards this ethnic peace. And there is a specific model that Dr. Wong Chin Huat has put, but I won't discuss that today. It's called the mixed member proportional system, which is to say we basically divide our system up into one, which is first past the post. So this is a technical discussion. I have a table down there for you to look at. First past the post, and then also PR, proportional representation. That way we'll attain a higher level, I think, of moderation where parties are given a fairer share of the votes as opposed to the current system that we have. I think I'll end there and then wait for another round of discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Terima kasih banyak, Dr. Johan. That was really very comprehensive and enlightening indeed. Yeah. Can we now have Dr. Oiki Beng? Yeah. Sila.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, dear friends and colleagues. I'm most happy to be here representing Penang Institute. Scale in the globe-spanning wars that culminated in what we call the Second World War. Now, the horrors of those times, to my mind, led to the need to formulate the Declaration of Human Rights, which was passed by the newly founded United Nations in December 1948. A line that had been crossed often in human history, but that in the industrial age had culminated in the conveyor belt extermination of humans, classified as inferior subspecies, had now to be made clear so that it would hopefully not be crossed as impudently as before. So my point is, the notion of human rights is basically a refusal to engage in the subspeciation of human beings by states or by ideologies. Extremism understood in contrast to moderation is therefore not simply a propensity to perform acts that are deemed extreme by popular standards. Instead, extremism should be understood as the direct result of ideas that involve a subspeciation of humans, where some categories are considered morally inferior to others. In that sense, conducting war normally involves such a process. This means that subspeciating actions and speeches in peace times may amount to warmongering or hate-mongering. I would warn here that this is not an easy matter to pinpoint why a person acts in an extremist fashion. Such behavior could be driven by socio-economic or other personal reasons, but which piggybacks on ideas that are extremist for whatever advantages or comfort that might provide. So what can be done? How does one discourage extremist thought in Malaysian society today? The obvious immediate measures that can be undertaken are, firstly, for leaders to speak out against hate speech and behavior aimed at ascribing moral or other inferiority to prescribed groups of people through conceptual exclusivism. By conceptual exclusivism, I mean ideations that place humans into moral categories from which they cannot, in principle, break out. Much that makes up power is moral, and the opinion of a country's leaders can do a lot in defining the discursive atmosphere of society. Silence is not a neutral stance, and where hate speech is concerned, silence is usually a supportive position. Secondly, reliable and objective implementation of legislations against hate speech marks society's rejection of ideas that divide the citizenry through essentialist arguments. Now, longer-term measures that can be undertaken in the Malaysian case, to my mind, must involve discursive strategies aimed at recognizing the country's diversity as a constant and as a strength in the building of its economy, its state, and its sense of nationhood. In contrast to unity through commonalities, the nation-building theme should be the sharing of diversity instead. Malaysia is culturally more diverse than even the most liberal of us can imagine. But as mentioned earlier, since culture is a state of flux, the cultural diversity we should be highlighting is not that of the community, but that of the individual. My belief is that more and more Malaysians should be encouraged to become storytellers instead. We should become a country of writers who write about their experiences and their lives. They should be more autobiographical, and through their self-reflections, they can claim that their identities are not collective ones, but are individual and unique ones instead. It is by working actively in refusing to be categorized as and refusing to think as subspecies of humans that the individual Malaysian mind can grow, and it is through focusing on the particular and the specific in each of our lives that the full beauty of Malaysia's cultural diversity can see the light of day and claim its right to define the country, the state, and the nation. So let individual culture overwhelm politics, let literature overwhelm the moral police, and the country should live up to the potential that everyone knows it has. I think I shall end there, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. The motto of the center is actually diversity within a unifying framework or something like that. Yeah. And what is that framework? Well, at least thus far we are looking at the federal constitution. Of course, that includes Malaysia Agreement 1963, Rukun Negara, yeah. National language, yeah, and the national education philosophy, if you like. But those are the pillars that we are looking at as the framework. Yeah. Kepelbagaian dalam bingkai kesatuan. That's Siddiq Fadil's term that we use as the motto of the center, and also the thinking process, as I mentioned, in trying to address the issues behind the two sides of the coin. Pardon? Kepelbagaian.
Unity and diversity.
Kepelbagaian dalam bingkai framework kesatuan. When you translate it into English, it's diversity within. I'm not so sure whether it is within a unity framework or a unifying framework. Within? Diversity within a unifying. Is it? Unifying sounds something like that. Yeah, or the...
Different from the Indonesian one.
The Indonesian is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. Yeah, yeah. That's a very strong position that they have taken for more than 60 years. We have like what Shah was saying, unity in diversity. I mean, that's a different way. It's the same thing said in a different way. But what we aspire to do, Dr. Johan and Dato is to actually actualize it. And as you said in your when you started your presentation, is try to be more serious about it, yeah, and looking at things. How do we actually make it happen, yeah? So we have two presentations here, which is very interesting. One from Dr. Johan, which is both an analysis with some suggestions as how do we go forward, and we have from Dato Beng on conceptual, putting the concept and how do we work on it. Okay, but the next work is about Malaysian hobby, which is food. Before we go to the other commentaries, I think we have a short break. Apa ni? That is a unifying. That is a real unifying thing lah. The teh tarik session, yeah, it's a must session. I'm sure Elizabeth, you have learned this teh tarik session. Of course, you have teh tarik in Singapore. I won't compare. Yeah, please don't start a debate which teh tarik is better. Okay, so I think coffee is served outside. We take I would say 5 minutes break. You can even bring coffee to the table. Sila. We come back in 5 minutes. I mean, 5 minutes, I know lah, it will be 7 minutes. Come, sila.
So I'm reading for the first time.
Yeah?
The age, I'm reading it first time. Your piece.
Yeah, my column is once a month lah. Used to be twice a month, tapi tak sempat lah. Time lah. My problem is boleh lah. kerana itu ia boleh ditinggalkan. If these are contested seats, you can see how everyone will be glued to their seats. Especially and some may change to a more comfortable seat. Don't ask the chair lah. Normally, people who moderate is the last to know his own fate. Okay. Oh, we are behind time now. Okay, brothers and sisters, welcome back to our roundtable discussion. We will continue with more of the gossips when we have lunch upstairs. The lunch is going to be slightly. Don't know what the is. Joke around by saying, make sure the food is good, otherwise someone will have to jump down. Okay, Dr. Mazli has to leave earlier because he has another, I don't know how many roundtable he is attending per day. So he requested that he speaks first. So over to you, Dr. Mazli.
Okay, thank you very much, Dato. Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi semua. Now it's interesting to listen to our both gurus, guru in politics and guru in history. We have reached the state that we acknowledge there is a problem with our situation in Malaysia, and both of them has addressed the problem and proposed the solutions to the problem, I mean, with both soft and hard approaches. But I don't take long. I just want to point out another root cause that leads or has led towards this disunity amongst our community. But not only amongst our community, but also what we have seen, the recent emergence of far-right movements, the recent polarization of many communities throughout the world, which based on the victimhood mentality. And everybody is using this victimhood mentality to justify whatever. Do I need to take that? Or is there something wrong with it? No, it's okay. Okay. Everybody has been using victimhood situation to justify whatever extreme idea that they are propagating or whatever radical approach that they are using. For example, if you look the Brexit phenomena last year, the language that been used by UKIP's leader, the language that been used by this English Defence League, is all about the English, white English, being victims in their own country. Trumpism. Again, they are playing with this victimhood situation or excuse. The same goes to Malaysian context. If you look at Malays, it's very funny, you know, this kind of victimhood card that they're playing. They're the majority, but they feel themselves being victimized. Victimized by the Chinese who are controlling, who's supposed to be the minority, but controlling the economy. They've been victimized by the liberals, for example, who have been dominating the sphere of discussion when it comes to issue of religion, social issues, and etc. They've been victims of DAP, for example. Although DAP is not the ruling party, but they would put the blame everything on DAP, including the BFS. This is a discourse that's being used by people in, formerly Perkasa, but nowadays they're low down for whatever reason. ICSIM, for example, our common friends. Yeah, you should have been sitting here, Helen. So we have, yeah, ICSIM and ISMA and even some UMNO politicians have been using this victimhood. The same goes to the minorities. I still remember, was it 2 years ago or was it last year? I was having a forum at the Dewan Perniagaan Cina. On the other side of the building, Ching Huat was with Chin Tong in a forum in Mandarin language. So after the forum, we came to have our more heavier forum amongst us, amongst ourselves. It did involve the tarik. And Chin Tong and Chin Huat have been accused of not understanding the Chinese community plight and mentality. They said they are no longer loyal to the Chinese community. Not Chinese enough. And the reason is very simple, because both of them are trying to tell them that don't feel yourself as the victims. No, you should move forward. You're no longer the victim. You're talking about victims. It's not only the Chinese, even Malays, even the Indians, even the Iban Kazazan and dan lain-lain, they are also the victims. So, but again, do we really address this issue when we're talking about nation building, multiculturalism or cultural pluralism, whatever? I think we need to address this. Otherwise, we'll be playing with theories, we'll be playing with, ideals, but we're not really live with, the grassroots aspiration of the mind of the people. And we need to address. I mean, it's true, like what I always love Kian Ming's approach is more into literature, this kind of approach. You say that we need to produce literatures to prove to lay people, to the community that actually when talking about victims, you're not alone. But again, we need to address who are the real victimizers and who are the real victims actually. Or we should also address, are the victims became victims due to their ethnicity or identity, or they became victims because somebody who wanted to stay in power wanted them to feel like they've been victimized. So I think another problem is why we have this mutual feeling of being victimized or the victimhood mentality, because we don't really talk to each other. Lack of engagement, lack of, teh tarik together, and we don't communicate at the same level, with the same language. By language, I do not mean, language as language, but with the same feeling. So this is where sometimes we could see in Malaysia, different ethnicities, different religions, we can share some physical space. And we can propose, we can enact, hard policies to make people share the same physical space. But again, the physical space is not sufficient enough. We must also share the same emotional space, the same, philosophical space, and the same rational and humanity space. This is, I strongly agree with Dato. I didn't notice it's Dato now. I strongly agree with him when he said that literature is very important in bringing the new ideals and this new dream that we all believe in. So we need to bring our level of discourse towards the center, where all the victims should realize that actually they are not victimizing each other, and they are not alone in becoming victims, and they should identify who's the real victimizer. And for that, they should come to the center. Centripetalism? Yeah, it's not going to talk anymore about identity, about ethnicities, but we need to address the real issue, which in this case governance is part of it, which in this case, rights is part of it, which in this case, humanity is part of it. So I think that's all for me, and thank you very much. Come on.
But when you talk about the real victimizer, bear in mind, they are looking after a new victim in the name of Mazli.
I'm already.
He already is. Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, victimhood mentality. Somehow the Malays wake up in the morning and feel that the Chinese are going to rob everything. Yeah? So you have the siege mentality. The siege mentality. A different kind of, some kind of a culture of fear, because the real victimizer do some kind of fear mongering, so people live in fear. Thanks, Dr. Mazli. Can we have Saudara Kian Ming?
Thank you very much, Dato Saifuddin, for this invitation, and also Prof for inviting me to share my thoughts on, I think, what is a very important issue. I was toying between responding to some of Johan's stuff on the political science part, or maybe going on a different tangent, and I like to perhaps follow up on what Dr. Mazli said by making 3 points. And I make these 3 points in a purposefully provocative manner, so I hope you guys don't mind, in order to invoke and create more debate. The first point I'd like to make is that all of us, including us in this room, are quote-unquote racist. Why do I say that? Quote-unquote racist. I think all of us, if let's say, we are talking to certain groups of, different groups of audiences, we would tailor our language and sometimes, more importantly, the content, so that the audience can hear what they want to hear. That doesn't necessarily mean that we are racist, but often, if we're not careful, we will go into racial polemic. I'll give you 2 examples. One example is the reaction that I saw in Malaysia Kini towards a good friend of ours, a lawyer by the name of Shaharuddin, who was commenting on his Twitter post on following up on the incident in Muar, where the laundrette was shown to have a sign that says only for Muslims only, and he mentioned in his Twitter feed that this is no different from cases where you say you will only rent out a room to a Chinese or a non-Malay person. And he went on to explain that this kind of discrimination has a long history in Malaysia, and that we should have a broader discussion on what it means to be discriminated against. And if you look at some of the comments in Malaysia Kini in response to his article, many people who probably don't know that Shaharuddin is somebody whom would gladly accept the label of being called a liberal. They were criticizing him, saying that he is defending these kind of racist practices and calling him all sorts of very negative names. And that is, I think, an example of how people, if left to their own devices, can come up with quote-unquote very racist kind of responses. The other example I want to give is, in a WhatsApp group that I'm part of, which I think I'm the only non-Malay there. And recently I got a message from this group where they said that all Malays should only buy cooking oil that's produced by Malay companies, and that we should boycott all the cooking oil that's produced by Chinese companies. And then they gave a list of so-called Malay cooking oil, and then another one is a non-Malay cooking oil, Chinese cooking oil. And the rationale behind this was that the Chinese traders and Chinese businessmen do all sorts of things to suppress and repress the Malay traders. Right? I think, of course, I don't think any one of us in this room would purposely go out to make racial or racist statements, but I don't think that it is beyond the pale to imagine that sometimes, people would not would forget and go towards these kinds of statements, which I think are much more common than not. So that's my first point, that all of us are quote-unquote racist sometimes. The second point I'd like to make is that, okay, let me just remind myself. The second point I'd like to make is that our racism, quote-unquote, is often a symptom of some other grievance. And I think Dr. Mazli pointed to it just now. You know, the Chinese are unhappy perhaps with the consequences of the NEP. The Malays are unhappy with the economic dominance of the Chinese. The Indians feel marginalized because they lack political and economic power. Sabahans and Sarawakians feel as if they are forgotten orphans because people usually talk about the three main races in Malaysia and forgetting that we have East Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak. So I think people are not necessarily racist because they don't like people from other races, but they are often expressing some sort of a deeper underlying grievance against some of the policies and institutions of this country. And I think this is something which always needs to be addressed when we are talking either on a personal level or in a larger group. When somebody says something racist, does that person really mean what he says, or is he or she trying to express a frustration with a larger institutional kind of setup or framework? The last point I want to make is that while we cannot get rid of all these kinds of racism, quote unquote, overnight, I think what we can do and what we must do is to call out speech which is overtly racist, especially by politicians and those who are in power. I still remember, a minister who came out to say that it is actually the greedy Chinese middlemen who are the cause of the rises in the cost of living and prices after the implementation of the GST. And he was applauded as a hero among some quarters, right? And I remember that because recently I read a story about how the Mara Digital Mall, the UiTM Digital Mall, is also guilty of having a middleman, but you have a different middleman, that all the traders there must go through a certain company that I'm quite sure is a Bumiputra owned. That's why the prices of the things that they sell at the Mara Digital Mall is 10% higher than what you can buy at Lau Yat, which is why a lot of people still go back to Lau Yat, right? So I think we let many people get away with saying all sorts of crazy things, especially politicians, and we can see how even in the US with Trump, calling NFL players recently sons of bitches, you can see that there was a real outpour of criticism against him, even among some of the Republican politicians, right? And if, let's say, that kind of scenario were to be repeated here in Malaysia, would we have politicians on both sides? Whichever side you're on, if, let's say, somebody from Pakatan Harapan comes out to say something that is racist, do we have the courage to go out and reprimand these people publicly? Similarly, if there's somebody who's from the BN comes out to say something that's explicitly racist, do we have the courage to come out and criticize these people openly? Does the BN have leaders that would come out and criticize this kind of statement openly? I think only when we get to that stage can we talk about a scenario whereby we can try to address some of the other grievances and some of the other racist and racial attitudes that are taken by individuals who are not politicians. So I'd just like to stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Saudara Kian Ming. In our first roundtable at the launch of the center, our chairman Siddiq Fadil said something to this effect. Racism is still embraced by some and will surface at certain times. So racism is not dead yet in Malaysia. It's still there. You don't see it. Suddenly something happened, then it will come back to the fore. Dr. Mujahid, my partner in crime, while we were doing the Harmony Act.
I'll have to touch on that a little bit. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan selamat pagi. First of all, I would like to thank you Institute Darul Ehsan for inviting me, and also to be with a distinguished scholar that I read their books but never met the author, especially Dr. Johan. Of course, Dr. Beng, we met in Singapore. And also, I need to have some technical correction here. Number one, the paper you have, My Thoughts on Myanmar Mission, is just something that I want to share with the participant. I had a mission, we had a mission to Myanmar based on the International Platform for Parliamentarian on Freedom of Religion. So that really tells you the story about the need for freedom of thoughts, freedom of religions, and also the issue of handling multi-religiosity and also multiracial. So you don't have to, you can read it when you finish, after I finish, and the important points or slides is right in front of you. And also they miss in the printed version one page, but I was told that this one page was given to you later on. I wouldn't want to start next page. I wouldn't want to start on. Yeah, can we have the next one? This is just the title. Oh, you have it? Oh, sorry. I don't want to go ABC of multiracial issues, but I think it is pertinent that we understand the structure of the thinking first before we can go into detail. Basically, a diverse and plural society is actually why we need to understand multiculturalism, has been said by Dato, and also multiracialism. Because we need to relate one another from different groups that resides under one single unit. We're talking about here, like if you are in Malaysia, we are one single unit. But you don't have a choice. You have to face with them every day in your economy, in your education, in your everyday setting, going to the market, going to schools and all that. The ideas that actually supports this multiracial setting is, I think was mentioned by Dr. Beng, is pluralism. But I would like to correct, or I would like to clear the understanding. I do not mean pluralism here as to equate all faiths are the same. That is a totally different setting. No. I'm just trying to make things clear. It has nothing to do with that. Pluralism here as to how different groups engage in tolerance and respect. I don't know whether the word tolerance is correct here, but we don't have any other choice. Because tolerance is you are forced to accept something, tolerate something, which we don't mean what? Of being forced to accept others, no. But that's the best word we find, tolerance and respect. Having common, just now Doctor said about commonalities, so what was it? Sufficient commonalities. It's right here, common interests. And here we are binded with the citizenship, being a Malaysian, being patriotic to our nation, the federal constitution, the king and all those laws that we have. And then security, what interest or what is most important is when the country is at stake by whatever security reason, then everyone has to unite and stand together as a Malaysian. And also there's an economic issue. When you talk about GST, they do not choose whether you are Chinese or Malay or Indian or you are UMNO guy or you are Pakatan guy or Barisan. Everyone will face the burden. That actually unites us, actually. Thank you, GST. Sometimes it's interesting that the word multiracial is also used to connote the need to unity. That is where Dr. Johan mentioned about it's a necessity. National harmony as multiracial is prone to give rise to racism, prejudice, and to some European countries they call it xenophobia, afraid of foreign people coming and controlling their country. Now today pluralism is at threat, and everyone will agree with me on that note, attributed to intolerance, attitude, hatred, and don't forget global conflict. Just like what happened in Myanmar, in Rohingya, in the Rakhine state. Although they would consider that as a local issue, but that gives effect to others who that in other countries are the majority. That is a Muslim. So today we must be very careful on the fact that anything that happens in Malaysia to the Christians, for example, it will also affect to the majority Christians in other countries. Moderate thought has been mentioned as against extreme and refusal to compromise other views. Moderation is something, some people do not like the word moderate, you know, but we want to understand the substance of it is finding the right tune between what you hold as principle, but without infringing other people's right. I may have my own principle, but this doesn't mean that I have to infringe to other people's right. I have to respect them. But I can still hold to my view. Finding that right tune is what we call moderation. Moderate thinking in politics, and coming to the real world of politics, to make it very simple, is believing in democracy. That's the choice we have, at least. Preserving rights of others, which has been mentioned by our main speakers, and upholding, spelling mistake typo, upholding the law and the Constitution. You have got no choice. This is the practical aspect of being moderate. Multiracial realities demands a moderate thinking to stir the process of tolerance, respect, and defending the rights of others. Yeah. What happened? It's not working? That takes 3 minutes of my time, 2 minutes. Injury? Okay. Thank you for being moderate. Well, you hate the global moderate movement. You should.
Used to.
Now, I have to touch on this. You know? Yes, this is my favorite subject. I've written a book on Islam dalam kepelbagaian. I hope someone can translate it in English. And also, I wrote a book on Islam bukan agama teroris. Islam is not a religion of terrorism. So I think I have to touch on this because it's always the perception that Islam is always against multiracial, multiculturalism. It's just like no one, only Islam, no others. Which is wrong, actually. Whoever are giving that thoughts to the people or to the public is actually misrepresentation of Islam. Multiracial doesn't come at odds. It never was and never will be at odds with Islam. Because the content of Islamic civilization was erected based on pluralism. No one can deny that. You know, you have a very vast empire where all races live under one authority, the Khilafah. And the underlying multiracial environment are, number one, which was mentioned by Dato Dr. Owe, on respecting humanity. I mean, that's the way forward. And Islam really put that as not just a political manifesto, but it's a command of God. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. That we have karamna, honor the sons of Adam, that is human, and we have given them abundance of wealth in the sea and also in the land, and we have preferred them comparing to our other creation. That's very clear fact. It's not a political manifesto, but it's something that every Muslim should hold very dear and hold tight to it. That is why you have in the Islamic literature the issue of humanity or al-insaniyah, which is very powerful, and also promoting dialogue. And there are so many verses of the Quran mentioning about dialogue. Ud'u ila sabil rabbika bil hikmah wal mu'izzati al hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Promote dialogue, discuss with them with the best manner. And then the concept of protection, zimma. I'm not talking about the form. I'm not talking about the form. Yes, they were being institutionalized during those days, but the spirit of zimma is actually to respect other people's faith, to respect other communities, to respect other race. Yeah. No. Yeah, I agree. Yes, there's the concept, but the spirit is totally different on how you're going to apply it in the modern world. You ask me, there is no zimma in terms of categorization. There is no harbi in terms of categorization. There are no musalim, those who pass by, because we don't have a khilafah. And this is a totally different setting of a nation state, which have constitution, which have citizenship. So we in Amanah came up with this idea of fiqh al-muwatana, or the understanding of citizenship, based on the spirit of the Sharia. And the freedom of religion, yes, it's very important. This is what our good friend Dr. Farooq Musa got in trouble, led himself in trouble when he speaks of freedom of religion. And Mustafa Akyol, for bringing Mustafa Akyol, and this was done by the religious authority, which they should understand more than we should. Freedom of religion is something that has been practiced in Islam throughout the history. You might find some problem in that, but that does not represent the real understanding of freedom of religion. Why? Because this is and I believe in the Shura concept, there are a lot of values which is also incompatible with democracy. We need to go forward with this understanding. People's right to choose and dismantle the leadership is also one of the important issue in appointing a leader. That a leader is not totally absolute to be there forever. He can be dismantled anytime, in as long as his presence does not deter the interests of the bigger ummah. So that in itself is actually trying to put democracy in place, having that in the Islamic literature. We just need to adapt that into our modern and our nation today. Next one. 2 minutes. We got to go. Okay then, take care. Next. Whoop. Wait, no, before that. Just one more. One. Next. I'm not. After that. Now I can press. Okay. This is important. Okay, take care, brother. Challenges. Some of it have been touched by our distinguished speaker. Rise of extremism. Yeah, the rise of extremism is, you cannot stop the rise of extremism. I do agree with Kian Ming, my good friend. Extremism is, there are two things about extremism. One is extremism that builds from within your mind and thoughts. That's the most dangerous thing, because you believe in it, you fought for it, and you are really, or you can die in holding that. But you also have extremism that arises from other factors, not within, of economic reason, of neo-colonization. What happened in Iraq, what happened in Syria, give rise to extremism, not because they want to be extreme, but they want to defend their nation, they want to defend, and the best way to do that in the state of war is to give rise to extremism thoughts, that you need to die, you need to defend your country, okay? And of course, it gives rise also to the extremism gives rise from the failed state. When a state is failed, no democracy, you are giving way for extremism to rise. Okay, so that is why we need to make our state function, our democracy function. Competing ideology. Now, it's very strange today when you see UMNO has moved towards extremist thoughts. Not because they like to be extreme, but because they want to stay in power and to get the votes from the Malay. And that's why it's unimaginable that you have PAS and UMNO sitting together with a totally different, attitude about moderation, extremism. But that is not the reason. The reason is for other political issues, for vote reason or just to maintain the Malay votes and all that. So competing ideology actually, now today everyone wants to be Islamic. So when Mujahid say about something about the beer festival, say, oh, no, it's not Islamic enough. So we want to hear something like, ban the beer festival, no beer festival, don't support. Ah, this guy is really Islamic. So Mujahid is a liberal guy, everyone knows that, which is wrong. When you want to compete who is being Islamic, then you are using Islam. And that's why our party is really against this such exploitation of religion. Humanity against racial supremacy flavored with religious justification. And this strange thing about Melayu Islam and Islam Melayu, I do not know which root it comes from, which justify every single step they move in the name of Melayu Islam, Islam Melayu, which is actually a racial supremacy flavored with religious justification. Well, this is my point of view. Humanity against national interests, actually this is a typo. Humanity against national interests. Example, this may not apply in Malaysia, but we will be facing it. Refugees crossing Europe from war-torn country. Means to say that, I think Dr. mentioned it, that Dr. Johan mentioned it, that the people in Europe, they get more rights to the rights in terms of facing this problem of coming, the influx of the war-torn refugees, because they say that we need to give food to your own people first before you want to give food to others. Our resources are very scarce, so we cannot accept anyone others to come. But Merkel won the election, although she's still in the center, liberal, accepting the refugees. But yet she still won the election. That means to say that I think the European countries, you have two different, the leader may do something wrong, but the people itself will choose the best, model for the country to move on. Regimes using fight against terrorism to strengthen their position and use it against their political opponent. This is very true in many countries, especially in the Arab countries, that they use to fight terrorism, not to go against terrorism, but actually to use it against their political opponent. POTA, POCA, MKN was about fighting terrorism, but no, they're using it against their opponents, their political opponent, people like us. Okay? Local conflict affect regional instability and spread hatred among different regions groups. I've mentioned that to you. Way forward, this is my last point. Strengthening civil rights and continuous democratization. I would agree with Dr. Johan, that it's not just about winning the election. It's about how are you going to undo all these problems that we are facing for so many years. So every politician who inspired to become a politician and thought that they just want to win the election, they are wrong. They better stop now. Pakatan Harapan will have to think seriously on how to uproot and undo all this. And politicians will have problem by doing that because we have our constituencies, we have our voters, but you have got no choice to do it without foregoing your principle. That is the most difficult part. Regional effort to stop, law on equality. Just for your information, I've just submitted my private members bill today in the parliament on the law of equality and also punishing hate speech. Just now you mentioned about hate speech, criminalizing hate speech, and also the setting up of the Commission for National Harmony, which I think Dato Saifuddin was with us when we drafted that for the purpose of NUCC, National Unity Consultative Council, but was rejected by the Prime Minister. So I'm taking it at the level of private members' bill. but I don't know how am I going to be treated, whether I will be treated the same as RUU 355 by Hadi, who had the privilege to bring it to the Dewan. I don't know whether I don't know whether it can be, I can see the light on that, because it can outrightly be rejected even in the Speaker's chamber without giving any chance for us to propose it. But yes, we will forge on this, freedom of religion, criminalizing hate speech must be put forward. This is what Malaysia need, I think, for the understanding of multiculturalism. Regional effort to stop violence and killings of different ethnic and religious groups. We have to be regional in our thinking, because what affects Myanmar, what happened in Myanmar will affect us, will affect Indonesia. What happened in Malaysia will affect Indonesia, will affect Philippines. We have to be very careful on this. Educating the need to live in a multiracial environment through advocating dialogues and intellectual discourse, like what IDE is doing, which is highly applauded. Because here we can, continue dialogue. We may have different views, yes, but there's no reason for us to stop engaging in dialogue and intellectual discourse. And I'm very sorry to hear what happened to Mustafa Akyol, who was stopped at the airport and brought to Jawi and put in, I think, in lockup for what, 3 hours or what, 16 hours before he was deported back to the US. This is a very sad day for Malaysia, because you are telling the world that we do not respect, number one, intellect. We do not, we do not want any intellectual discourse, which ultimately will have different views and ideas. And the most unfortunate part is that they do that in the name of Islam. They do that in the name of Islam, which I disagree totally. I'm innocent of this, because Islam do not at any point of time stop from a free intellectual discourse. And what happened to our friend Dr. Farooq Musa also is a sad day for freedom of speech, freedom of giving ideas and thoughts. And I think Parti Amanah had made a clear stand that we should not bow to this, stopping people from giving ideas in the intellectual discourse. Leaders of different regions set an example of peace building. This is very important. People like those who represent certain faith, Christians, Buddhists, Muslim, must come together, sit down, and show to their followers, like, look, this is the way forward. Any religion would not call for any form of violence or hate against other people. Alhamdulillah, the last Ramadan, as the chairman of the Aceh Mosque, which is a heritage mosque, 200 years old, I'm the chairman. We managed to get a buka puasa with all the different religious groups. And we walked from the St. George Church, which is the end of the Harmony Street. If any one of you have ever been to Penang, they call it the Harmony Street. We walk about maybe 800 meters from there to our mosque. My mosque is actually at the end of the Harmony stretch. And then we had buka puasa together. So all the priests, all the monks came. And for me, that is a show of case that, if leaders of different faiths show good example that this is what peace is all about, I think the followers would follow their respected religious leaders. Stop the war. This is very important, because if the war continues and no political rights, no democracy in the war-torn country, you will still find the problem of war refugee. They will want to leave their country, war-torn country, to another country, and that will create a lot of problem. So I believe this is our way forward in expanding the thoughts and ideas of the main speakers. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Private members bill.
Bus bill, yeah. We had fun defending the proposed bill those years, And you cannot imagine the kind of debate that we had. And it was at that time that Mujahid, myself, and Chiwi found that so many of our MPs actually didn't read the Constitution. They don't even, they can articulate Article 3, Article 153, blah, blah, blah. When you ask them the second question, and yet they say, oh, the bill is against the Constitution, against 153, against this, against that. But anyway, that's Malaysia lah. Malaysia, it's fun. Dr. Helen Ting.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Saifuddin Abdullah for inviting me to this roundtable, even though he's not sure what I'm going to talk about. Actually, what I prepared is a bit inspired by the write-up you sent to all of us. So I'm going to start from that, between consociationalism and centripetalism. Basically, the two concepts is about how we could have some sort of arrangement to have inter-ethnic power sharing in a society where, you know, there's a deep social cleavage. The thing is, I follow more another scholar with the name of Donald Horowitz, who wrote a short article on this, which differentiated the consociationalism from centripetalism, even though, you know, the Liphart had take Malaysian case as a case of consociationalism, but Horowitz is saying that Malaysian case is actually not a consociationalist case. The model, strictly speaking, he thinks that it's more a centripetalism. I'll explain why I think the distinction is important. Consociationalism, I think Liphart in his book lists out, for instance, having minority veto or forming a grand coalition and proportionality and so on. And all these measures are absent from Malaysia. So what he is arguing is, what happened is there were conditions conducive for moderates of different groups to come together and sort of have a winning formula. So he was arguing that over the years, the winning formula for Alliance and later on Barisan Nasional was because they were trying to position themselves as the moderate or those in the middle, so they get votes from both the moderate, the different ethnic communities, whereas the opposition had to position themselves mostly on the basis of ethnic constituency, so they only get one section of the vote, whereas those who are positioned in the middle, they could get, you know. But he's also saying that because our model is so-called centripetalism, which means incentive for moderates to work together, it is subject to, easily subject to degradation. And we have seen that happening over the years in Malaysia. And, you know, initially the constitution was very balanced legal document, except for, you know, some part of it, which, because from that time onwards, actually there were already slow degradation towards so-called ethnic majority domination. Now, for me, the many problems we are happening now is because of this degradation. And so, for instance, what Dr. Mujahid was saying, you know, they are going to defend the so-called moderate views, and it's going to be difficult in the constituency, and they are going to do it no matter what. This means that the situation or the context is not favorable to such a view. It means that our condition had deteriorated. And of course, we have all these factors of erosion of institutions. Now, for the case of Malaysia, I would pick up the terms distinction picked up by Dr. Wee about nation building and state building. Unfortunately, I think for both cases, state in terms of state institutions, it has been deteriorating. Then we were talking about the rule of law or the malapportionment of constituencies, even judiciary independence, the autonomy of election commission, etc. So in terms of state building, we seem to be going down the trend. But at least I think Malaysia has been seen as a success for many from outside for many years. It was probably because this formula of centripetal force towards moderation had somehow a moderating effect. So we managed to sort of carve out some sort of deal so that, it enables the so-called uplift of the social mobility of the Malay communities was relatively successful, and also to maintain the so-called inter-ethnic peace and so on. However, I would like to argue that the record, especially for nation building, is really very mitigated, and I think we are in a new sort of crisis, because the policy of the government is creating, we are talking about centripetal force, the policy of the government is actually creating more centrifugal forces, which threatens to sort of tear up the society in a way. So I just want to say two things which are of key concern. Very often we talk about racism and inter-ethnic relations and so on. We focus on interpersonal level, but actually we need to also look at the bigger framework in which this takes place. And I think it is shaping everything. Especially, I think the one issue of concern is this framework. What Shad Salim Faruqi is saying, that the attempt at silent rewriting of our constitutions. If we want, how do we want to create a more situation favorable to this centripetal model? I think the first thing to do is probably, if, let's say, Pakatan Harapan could, govern, is to reform the Electoral Commission. I think the latest redelineation give you some sort of imagination on how we would deteriorate further into this race politics and religion. I have not touched on other institutions because it's not related to this so-called inter-ethnic. But another thing that is of big concern actually is, the relationship between religion and the public policy. To what extent religious belief should guide public policy? Where is the limit? Because I think, I do think that you cannot stop religion from influencing public policy, but we need to find a balance in the sense that we are an inter-religious society. So if we always look at it from one religion's point of view, that is the situation now. It is creating a lot of fear and a lot of worries among those who are not belonging to the religion, and also even within the religion, the reality is that now that there is one official religion, official view of the interpretation of the religion, and it is being imposed within that religion. So I think that there is an issue that to what extent religion, and where is the boundary between religion and public policy? And the other thing that is, so at the institutional or governance level, there's a lot of things to do. And I think that this problem between jurisdiction between civil and religious courts is creating crisis, which maybe we did not perceive it even. For instance, when AG says there is no case against the Alkitab for the Bible Society, the religious authority continue to say there is a case, and they continue to detain the Bible until much later, and it was through mediation that it was settled. And this is a crisis, in my opinion. This is a crisis of rule of law. And second case, for instance, that the fact that civil court had issued the warrant of arrest against that man, I forgot the name, for withholding the child from the spouse, the non-Muslim spouse. And what did the IGP say? IGP said, I cannot act. He cannot act on a civil court judge order because he said there is a conflicting orders. This is another crisis. Maybe we don't see it, but this can bring to very serious conflict and problems. You can see it coming already. Okay? So here there is a big issue that the autonomy of the judiciary, and so on. There are those who are pushing for a different interpretation of Article 3.1 of the Constitution about Islam as the religion of the Federation. It's already happening. We can see them in court cases, judges' deliberation. And there are institutions pushing for this agenda called ICSIM. And we have social groups who believe in this and who are pushing for it, including someone like the lawyer of Dr. Mahathir, Khatri. Yes. So it is everywhere. It's not just in the opposition or in the government, but it is everywhere. This is, for me, the big crisis, which is going to bring towards more extremism. For instance, this is at the institutional level. I think something needs to be done. And secondly, in the public sphere of contestation, I would say, till now, more or less, at least for instance, in the case of Dr. Farou's case, at least Amana, issue a statement and say, we should not impinge on this public policy. I feel this is a right move because even the Prime Minister, even if he disagree, we know that he's very careful. And this is distorting the framework in which the so-called public contestation and discourse taking place. And for instance, the beer festival. I appreciate that, Asmin, Menteri Besar Asmin Ali, he said that we have to follow the local council regulation. We don't make it a religious issue. But if there is some sort of sensitivity, we find ways to ensure that, I don't call that non-Malay, of course, I don't drink beer or whatever, but we need to respect differences, yeah? And we need to allow space for such thing. Not that I endorse that, yeah. So for me, it is a very important sphere also, how the politicians behave and in sending the messages. And as Dr. Mujahid is saying, the situation is not in favor of those who are standing up for minorities' rights, but hopefully if politicians see that it's advantageous for them to do that, then it means a context that is going towards the so-called centripetal model. Now, thirdly, at the third level, at the communities level, I'm glad Dato Saifuddin touched on the other project about Islam. I think they are linked because the Islam here is linked with, just like you say, Melayu, Islam, Islam, Melayu. And it is not a racial issue, it is an ethnic issue which has a religious dimension. I feel there should be education on federal constitution, as Dato Saifuddin find out. Many MPs, even I think our speakers, once he was asked whether we are a secular state or what, many of them don't know our history. They don't know federal constitution. They don't know what is 153, and they don't understand Article 3.1. I think there should be education on our federal constitution, and also there should be education on our history. The history textbook is totally slanted at the moment. So this I will call is what is the commonality, the common framework. If we don't have that common framework, then why does the Malays think we need to coexist peacefully with non-Malays? This is a Malay country. This was an Islamic country. Only the colonial people take over, but now we are independent. So why are we following the colonial power to implement common law? We should be implementing more Islamic law because it was Islamic country anyway. So this was the framework. But this is because also the portrayal of history have been so biased. Now it seems there's one researcher who counted the pages in history textbook of lowest forms. The ratio is something like 80 on Malays to 1 or something. I can't remember, but it used to be 3 to 1. And now it has been so... And if you follow New Straits Time, there was a suggestion for Sibo Kadigasu to be included in the history textbook. There was one guy with the name Arif Ishak. He was saying, oh, we should follow discipline of history strictly. And that means Malay-centric history is a normal one. I have heard this before. Somebody was saying, it's so unnatural to include other groups because, we were Malay Kingdom. So, when you have this type of perspective on history, when you have this type of perspective on the Constitution, you can understand why people act that way. Sometimes they think they are acting in the correct way. And we need that basis to move forward, and this is not there. The other thing I'm not an expert in, what I heard from Prof. Ahmad Fauzi, he is saying that the Islamic education curriculum, which was introduced in the 1990s, mid-90s, yes. I haven't done any research on that, and I'm not expert, but he is saying that they have introduced some sort of element of Islamic religious extremism into the curriculum. But I don't even want to touch on that. But for me, it's alarming to hear a mufti. By the way, the press, please be careful. Can you not report on this? I have gotten into trouble with for saying things, all right? But here I'm just sharing, okay? Now, when I hear a mufti saying the punishment for apostasy should be death, but we cannot do it in Malaysia. For me, this is sign of extremism, very clear sign. But those people who say so, I believe many people believe so in Malaysia. This is the sign of danger. What should be done about this? And another thing is, when people say, civil marriage should be dissolved when one converts to Islam, and by Islamic law, they are already, the marriage is already dissolved. That's why you don't have to follow the civil law. This is another problem. When lawyers advocate that we should follow the Islamic way, then where is the non-Malay's rights? This is another sign of extremism, in a way. You cannot just resolve everything in Islamic perspective. You cannot just say, because it's not compliant with Islam, whichever interpretation which could be wrong, then you say, it should be this way, and you push for that way. I think, so I'm happy that, I don't know whether this was Satya Institute or whatever, is proposing this idea of coexistence, how it is articulated and where it's going. I guess some people is sensing that something is wrong and something should be done. And I feel this will take a long time. But it's a long-term project which has to be done. Yeah. And the other point was, I won't elaborate much on that. It's about this rising sentiment of regionalism in East Malaysia. But the two key things is this incremental Islamization. I think people feel very strongly about that. I have heard those, some people who talk about that, those from Sabah and Sarawak. And the other thing is uneven development. And that, I think you have to address it at the policy level. But if you talk about extremism, I think what I was saying at that three level is important things to think about.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Just 30 seconds. Part of your question is exactly why we have Abdul Halim Ismail heading the team to do that research. I think the project will take us about a year or so. The idea is to come up with that fiqh, and later on to make it readable easily, and hopefully to be distributed to people that matters, people who give ceramah, people who that you don't just say certain thing, sesuka hati. There are lots of issues there. There are lots of issues which we have to settle. Yeah. The guy who has the last say for now is Professor Shaharuddin, the host.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Moderator, Dato Saifuddin Abdullah. To be the last can be on the negative side, or also can be in positive side. I can really include all the opinion of all these discussion inside my elaboration. Just a quick point. I want to embark on 3 points. The first one is we go first to the terminology of political moderation, because it can come into many names, and it depends on who is the leaders. If we are talking about the rulers, the parti pemerintah, the political parties that is in government, we have a lot of names of that kind of moderation. For instance, like we have Wasatiyah, the Islam moderation, under Najib, and then during Pa'lah you have this Islam Hadari. It's also have some certain connection with the concept of multiculturalism and moderation. And then definitely during Dr. Mahathir, you have the issues of creating Bangsa Malaysia with a Vision 2020. It's a part of a policy that have some connection with this multiculturalism. And then definitely when Najib, there's a lot of terminologies, not only Wasatiyah, and he create some kind of the Institute Wasatiyah meant for it under the Prime Minister Department. I don't know what is the role of that, but there are some 2 or 3 conferences that they organize to promote the issues of Wasatiyah or moderation. And then you have One Malaysia, definitely. And I don't know, it finish off because it is a failure. And then right now people don't talk anymore about One Malaysia, but it is also a way of talking about multiculturalism and moderation. And definitely the establishment of global movement of moderates. The first CEOs is Dato Saifuddin Abdullah, and you are the second. Okay, sorry. but we have a lot of discussion during that time. Talking about multiculturalism and all that. So the most important thing is the government, the part of the government also try to define the meaning of moderation. But definitely, when we talk just now in terms of politics, you have some kind of the government strategy of 2 sides of a coin. In one way, you want to promote multiculturalism. At the other side, you are trying to create or promote divide and rule. You try to embark with the extremes, nationalism. You try to be more Islamic than the other political parties. And then you are creating more on the culture of fear. So this is among the society. So this is the two sides of the government. One way you want, like what Dato Mujahid say something on, in order for them to maintain their rules. Definitely you need some kind of Islamic and a Malay flavor inside it. So that's why you have a moral policing. You are trying to be more Islamic than the other political parties, and then you try to join with the other political parties, that embark with the same ideology. So this is at the part of the government. They are trying to talk about moderation, and they are trying to talk about multiculturalism with the different ways. I go to the second things from the opposition view, for instance. Actually, I love the era of the honeymoon periods especially between the AP and PAS. Maybe it's sensitive for Dato Mujahid or on Kian Ming, but no. Yeah. That's considered to be a very honeymoon era. Definitely, Dato Mujahid plays a high role in promoting this kind of idea. From 2006 and 2014, you can see, for instance, in terms of politics, there is some kind of environment of this honeymoon era. Why? Because during that time, I'm not a politician. I'm still an academician. We goes to the pilihan raya kecil. And there's a lot of things that actually educate the society, especially the rural Malays. For instance, like during one of the by-election, you have it in Kelantan. For the first time, I think Lim Kit Siang goes to Kuala Krai. That is the first time in history during the Galas by-election. Okay, and that Mani Urai. That's where, for instance, thousands of Malay rurals here on Lim Kit Siang. The first time, I think it's the first time when I confront with Lim Kit Siang. Yes, this is my first time going to the rural area of Kelantan. Okay? That's why I said it's a honeymoon period. Okay. And definitely, there's a lot of, also the by-election of Kuala Terengganu, and also, I think the role played by PAS during that time under Dato Mujahid, the interreligious dialogue, the intercultural talks, and then in all the by-election, you can see some kind of this education of this multiculturalism. For instance, like in the by-election of Bagan Penang in Negeri Sembilan, that's where during that time is a Tanglong punya festival, okay, and then and then the past leaders during that time, used to have this festive way. I think this is the first time that the Party Islam do that kind of festival, okay, and that's why I say that it's honeymoon period. And the most important thing is you are educating the society.
Now it's what midterm crisis.
Midlife crisis. And that's why, as an academician, for instance, during that particular time, okay, it gives a lot of things. Rather than now, for instance, you have Amanah right now, right, doing that kind of jobs, okay, but PAS is departing from that kind of that kind of attitude into different kind of attitude to be more Islamic and more Malays than even UMNO, okay. So because I think the lack of interreligious dialogue and the lack of and then we should think on how to make it more, okay, on that kind of the situation. That's why, for instance, and a lot of things, for instance, the issue of Assalamualaikum and the issues of greetings, the non-Muslims and all that become the festivals things, and then it's quite freely, for instance, for the non-Muslim, we are welcome the chairman of Institute Darul Ehsan, Professor Dato Siddiq Fadil. Okay, so this is what I want to say on the opposite view. But you have the impacts on that from 2006 to 2014, and right now definitely there will you cannot there is some if you have some slight problem, for instance, like the October Fest and all that, it becomes not only a religious issue, but it becomes the racial issue. Okay, so we're trying. If there is time, for instance, the debate or the enculturation between the political parties should be there, okay, to solve the problems. Because most of the problems come from the leadership in the political parties, right? Okay, the third thing is what IDE can do, okay, the way forward. I think this is the think tanks that can move towards that. So the first one, definitely we are talking about embarking the religious and cultural dialogue. I think as what Dato Mujahid said just now, and most of the speakers said just now, I think this IDE can become one of the institutions that can play roles in making sure that the religious and cultural dialogue is there. And that's why, for instance, we are trying to embark on this faith At-Ta'ayyush fi Silmi, for instance, definitely.
I'm pronouncing as properly as I can.
Yes, because the guru is here. So, okay. So the methods of the living together, the coexistence. Okay. Because to do that, for instance, not only we need to have a research, but to have a proper publication that you can spread this information. So the ustaz and the professors have to talk on this kind of issues, okay, to influence the society, especially people in the grassroots. Okay? And secondly, definitely to change the mind of the society, to change the mind of the society is quite difficult. Okay? That's why, for instance, in Islamic, for instance, this IDE has come up with the Institute of Maqasid Sharia. Maqasid means how we can embark on the noble objective of the Sharia. Okay? sometimes we talk more on Sharia, but we forget the noble objective of why God create that kind of rules and regulation. Okay, so we need to do that, and that's why this IDE come up with the Institute of Maqasid Sharia in order for us to spread out the message of the real meaning of Islam and the real meaning of moderation and the real meaning of multiculturalism. Not only we can go back to the history, but we can move forward, and at least for that matter, for instance, how to make it more mainstream. Okay, because right now, with a lot of the social media, the WhatsApp, there is a lot of new ulama and new professors coming in. Okay, they knows everything. Okay, that's why how we can put forward, okay, and how to make this maqasid sharia and this fiqh ta'ayus to be more mainstream in the society, so that we can really go about to the problems of what you call it as this, how we can create a nation buildings in the context of Malaysia. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We would like to welcome Ustaz Siddiq Fadil, Chairman of IDE. Assalamu warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Now that salam was meant for Muslim and non-Muslim. We are very sure about that. Okay, we have a few minutes for discussion. I must apologize. I think there's not so much time, but I would really want to welcome interventions from the floor. Can I have the first hand? Yes, Adli. Adli is from Pusat Commerce. He used to work with me at the GMM. So we have formed a GMM alumni, found and seek refuge at IDE.
And I believe we are still working together to Saifuddin in this aspect, inshallah. So my name is Adli, yes, from Pusat Commerce. So briefly about Pusat Commerce, we are basically a human rights organization focusing on the anti-racism project, or in a bigger role, it's a non-discrimination project. On racial discrimination, just want to share, we also come up with 2 reports on the annual racial discrimination report, and we will continue doing this. It's basically to show basically a manifestation on the level of racial discrimination that we are living in right now. So directly on the intervention is that apart from the issue of extremism, I believe there's another problem of ism, which is labelism, because understanding the importance of moderation, sometimes there are groups that not just occupy that platform, but also monopolize that platform, and they call themselves as the moderates. And the way how I see it, this is basically create another problem, because the moderates, even though how much that they have actually monopolized this notion of moderation, they also at a certain extent label others as extremists, simply because by calling themselves as moderation. Because the way how we see it, moderation is not something that you can attach to a person, but it's rather it's just a platform whereby we can include everyone on that platform. And then this inclusivity is something that is important for us to protect, because as of now, even though whether we like it or not, when we mention the name of ISMA, Perkasa, IKSIM, and all these other groups, and by calling themselves as extremists, it's actually rather than opening up the doors for us to have a proper direction towards a better nation building, but rather now we are segregating more on this aspect. And it's quite important, I'd like to congratulate IDE for focusing on the fiqh ta'ayush al-silmi, because for every action there's a counter-reaction. When we mention about what is happening in the rise of populism in the West, it's kind of sad to see that Malaysia has been in that state for the past 60 years. Since the day of independence, the rise of populism has been continually increasing since the 1950s, particularly during the independence. And the way how I see it, it's quite important to share as well from what I've heard. Again, this is something that we need to have more in-depth research, is how the rise of the Malayism, or the notion of Malay supremacy of the Malay, have actually created more divisions for the non-Muslims and non-Malay. For example, the Indians now, there's coming from Dato Dennis Jayasuriya, he mentioned that in the Indian community there's also an increase of Indian who's actually look up to Modi and BJP party rather than MIC, for example. So this shows on how the issue of communalism exists simply because of the reaction of the majority. And so now it is quite important for us to mobilize the majority to have more inclusivity, so that the minority will feel secure of their identity. So the notion of Bangsa Malaysia is we are talking about politics of identity, and when we talk about identity, we often look at an identity that can empower us. For example, if a Malay feels that by being Malay can help them entering university, they will call themselves as Malay. But if they go to a Bugis or a Jawa, they will basically claim that I'm a son of a Jawa and a son of a Bugis just to gain votes. So in this notion, I guess it's important for us, the Center of Kajian Ethnic Bangsa Malaysia, it needs to look at on how Bangsa Malaysia can actually empower Malaysians rather than the other identity. And this, by usually looking at the concept of melting pot, by being Bangsa Malaysia doesn't mean that you are becoming less Malay, less Indian, or less Muslims, or less other, but it rather empowers you as a whole, because Bangsa Malaysia encompasses of all that kind of characteristic. And I agree on the ignorance of the Malaysian, because Sakomas also organized project on the ground with community. We conduct a non-discrimination workshop, and during those workshops, most of the public or the society disagree that they are racist. You know, but then when we go deeper and deeper, then you realize we are kind of racist, but to a certain extent. And it's important for us whenever we do this workshop. There's this one writings by Professor Jean Alport in the 1960s called The Law of Prejudice, where he come up with one principle called principle of least effort, which means that our brain somehow creates a notion that we need to take the things which is much easier for us. So for now, the easier path for us is to have a box of Melayu, Cina, India, and lain-lain. So in order for us to go deeper into Bangsa Malaysia, I guess it's important for us as civil society and as community to have an extra effort. And this includes to have a dialogue with those so-called extremists. And again, with the notion of Muslim and non-Muslims, I have this internal question on myself as well, but I managed to, as of now, find an answer saying that the terms of Muslim and non-Muslim is not something that is derogatory, but rather is to show on appreciating where we're coming from, and not looking at where are we heading to. And this is the same goes for the notion of moderates or extreme or anything. Sometimes internally maybe we thought that they are an extremist, but when it comes to verbally, the manifestation of that idea shouldn't be imposing that you are an extremist, so we should have stopped discussion, but rather than appreciating where we're coming from, and the direction is in it to be something that's more inclusive. So that's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Adli. Yes, Ong. And then Farid. Yeah. Sure.
So, because I need to go. Well, I'm not an academic, I'm not a politician, I'm not a policy maker. What I can share is a real story that Dr. Hui, I think you can learn from it. It's a real story on a corporate basis. But before I go into that, I'll draw right away what brought me back to Malaysia. I used to work for a company overseas. What brought me back to Malaysia was the Ehsan violence. I came back to Sydney, my late father, so I saw the past flag waving, in the cemetery, talking cemetery. So I saw the past flag waving, amidst the incense smoke in the cemetery. I said, oh my goodness, the country has changed. It's time for me to come back to contribute. So I come back and lead a multinational organization in Malaysia. Obviously, there's a lot of learning. And here I want to share with you one particular learning that I have, and how perhaps this learning can seed your thought in terms of how to help poor people like us on the ground to do better. Number one, I want to emphasize the importance of mentoring system. Whatever it is, whether it's relating to racial relationship, religious matter, at every level of our society, we need a mechanism that can mentor leaders who are in a certain position. So the example. So in a US company, we are governed by a lot of business, goals and all that. And here I am in Malaysia. Sometimes, by the way, I have about 300 employees, 60% are Muslim. Now take note that I say Muslim, I didn't say race. Because in my organizations, there are Chinese who are Muslims. There are Indians who are Muslim. So I have about 60% Muslim and the rest are non-Muslims. Right? So when we try to drive COT, we call it critical objective, right? And we need a deadline. Sometimes we find that even very senior Muslim employees, the directors level, they will say, inshallah, okay? They will say, well, they try their best. So, of course, we have a business pressure, right? Every quarter, our share needs to go up. So we need to be answerable to the global managers or global directors whom we report to. So how do we then manage that? So initially I thought, it is a challenge. So, of course, two views come to my mind, and this is real. I don't profess that I'm not a bias. I have my pride, so I have my prejudice, so I say, well, maybe this person, they're just not there, not cut out for a job, and trying to evade the responsibility. So, on the one hand, I have provided the facilities, based on the need to, the surau and all that. So on the other hand, I'm not getting a commitment on productivity. So I'm in a dilemma, right? So until this wise man, I go out, to engage people, in a community. One wise man told me, he's a Muslim, he told me, it is nothing wrong. It is that way, that expression has nothing wrong. But you need to know how to manage that expression in order for you to deliver, in order for you to fulfill your productivity goal. So what he told me was, he said, okay, well, if they can't commit to a date because of some belief that everything is dependent on the Almighty, then you have to ask them the next question. That is, okay, so you say you try your best, inshallah and all that. I respect that. You can commit a date because no one can control the destiny other than the Almighty. So that's the first thing I learned. So secondly is I put in a management structure. I say, okay, can you show me your plan? How are you going to do it? So some can show me the plan, and those are the genuine people who really work, who is subscribed to the belief of your business strategy and all that. And of course, there are some who struggle to try to come out with a plan and all that. And those are the people who need more help and more guidance. So what I'm trying to say here is that at the community level, at each company, there are always needs, like me, in the past, that we need a quality mentor, someone who is non-biased, apolitical, that has the interest of the society or the company or the country at stake, rather than their own political interest to try to derail, whatever that is necessary. Because when we talk about nationhood, we need to grow, right? We need to be progressive. So that is what I want to share. Hopefully, based on what we are talking about here, I think we have the belief, but I think we are not seeing the habit. So what kind of mechanism we need to put in to cultivate that habit? I hope cendekiawan di sini bolehlah tolong saya. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much. Appreciate. Yeah. By the way, you have 300. 300. After the election, can you make it 301? just in case. Great.
And I must say, one of the branches has 100% Muslim.
Wow. Okay. Great. Thank you.
And when I go there, I use Malay. And one of the things it touched me greatly was when I went there, when I saw the condition of the surau, when I saw the water that they're using, for so many years, this company has been in Malaysia for so many years. No one look at how they are being treated. It takes a non-Muslim to improve that facility. In spite of the previous leadership in the companies are Muslim.
Yeah. This is something that I'm not sure whether this falls under Cikgu Halim's project or not, but I mean, these are issues that we need to address. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. I have sat in several, I think this is my 4th series of IDE's roundtable discussion. First, I want to be very specific with Dr. Johans and Dr. Ui's paper. On page 4 of your paper, Dr. Ui, you mentioned about cultural pluralism instead of multiculturalism. Yeah, multiracial. You see, I was the president of the Malaysian Society in the University of Lancaster back in 1988, 89. What struck me interesting was there was the issue of mainland China. What intrigued me was I came to the conclusion that Indonesian Chinese, I'm sitting beside my friend in Singapore, the Singaporean Chinese and the Malaysian Chinese and the mainland Chinese are culturally different.
So is PKR Chinese and the AP Chinese, as mentioned by someone. I won't mention his name.
Yeah. So in a way, I'm glad I'm in this discussion because the series of conversation that we had in the IDE roundtable, the theme that I'm getting is more towards individual narrative, more towards grassroots, what's happening on the grassroots. Because we are having, this is what Dr. Johan's point on page 2 or page 3 about the elites. We're having elites conversation. The politicians are the one talking, but actually on the grassroots, on the ground, it can be different. So we have heard stories which actually all these are made up by politicians to justify themselves. But on the ground, we are seeing some positive changes. That goes to your paper. You see, my mother was a Eurasian who converted to become a Muslim. The very thing you mentioned on page 4 got me interested because when her brother and sister commented, among the things I got from my mother is somebody commented her, why did she masuk Melayu? It intrigued me because we have to move on from talking about race. The reality is cultural pluralism. My mother, Eurasian. Her grandpa was from Europe. They came to become, the grandpa became a Peace Corps in Malay College of all places to teach English. I grew up going at year end for Christmas because my father left me, married a Chinese and converted into Islam. So perhaps on the ground we are seeing this interesting development. And when we do all this idea of DNA, for all you know, we are all somewhat different. On my father's side, it goes all the way to Medan, goes back to Arab. So I think my point is this. I think your paper right aptly says the individual narrative instead of the conversation about speciating the human species. I think it's time for us to talk about that. Even in the Islamic scheme of things, we need to talk about because I think this is also the conversation. We have the intra-Muslim issues and the inter between Muslims and non-Muslims, but we have a big scope between Muslim and Muslim conversation that has to be going on. So that's my first point. But I kind of like if we start conversing about more stories telling about the bottom up, empowering communities, more about what's happening on the ground, as opposed to just the elites conversation. So which goes to the paper from Dr. Johan, which I like the point about apply what you call about the consociational principles of mutual veto or maybe mutual respect. That we go more of the community position as opposed to the elites position, because the conversation is too much among academicians, among politicians. You see, I'm the chairman of Satamrudo at the moment. What's going through my WhatsApp about real conversation is I have Chinese, Indian, Malays in the conversation. and Malay Muslim. So I quite like, because what about the conversation when sometimes it's supposed to be religious conversation, suddenly it's shifted to racial conversation. So the Malays need to be educated more about Islam. And we haven't talked about, you talk about the other percentage of Muslims who are not Malay. What about the Chinese? What about the Indian Muslims? So I concur and I agree. We should also be able to move on to get more of the community experiences and use that to complement some of the conversation that's happening at the political and the elites level. So just some two, which I find the theme which is emerging from all this is encouraging, and I think we should build on that moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for it. In fact, I should mention that we are very clear in our mind at IDE that yes, we are organizing the series of roundtable, the two projects that I alluded to at the outset, but in at least one of the outcome that is within our control, meaning it is a program that we run, is the AYG, the Adab Youth Garage, which have just took off in four areas in Selangor. And that is to ensure that, that is to facilitate that AYG, as a youth center, small youth centers, casual for the young, would become a living example of whatever that we are discussing, besides other things. But that's one of the outcome that is within our control. What is not within our control will be policy, proposals that we will send to governments, especially Selangor. Yeah. Can I have the last hand before I know? Okay, so Shannon has the last hand. After this, I will invite both Johan and Beng for a few minutes of summing up. Yeah. Sila. Yeah, can someone pass the mic to? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Shannon from the Straits Times. I don't have much.
Straits Times Singapore.
Straits Times Singapore, yeah. I don't have much academic background, but my background is from a communications background, communications theory and things like that. So I approached this subject. It's just three small points. And the first, I think, has been touched by a lot of people, and it surrounds what we think an umbrella topic here is a kind of demographic violence that Malaysians suffer, and we suffer in this together. And a lot of it has to do with, also you have this MCI context, right? Malay, Chinese, Indian. And then, by the way, there are other people in Malaysia, which we lump into a DLL segment. And I think this has been touched by Dato. Very strange to call you Dato nowadays, but Dato must respect our monarchs. And also by other people about how there's a lot of intra-ethnic violence. And when Dr. Mujahid or Sharizan goes out there and says something, the fellas that whack them are not from other races or other ethnicities or other groups. It's within their own demographic groups. These are the people that will criticize them. And I think it's the same that happens within Chinese communities, so on and so forth. You're talking about Chintong, Jinhuat, they get attacked by their own communities. So there is a constant pressure to be pushed into a particular definition, a particular silo of what it means to be, whether it is to be identified by ethnicity or religion, ideology, so on and so forth. And strangely, people talk about social media as a democratizing factor, but actually it's being used very well as a way to police people, to attack them very openly on your Facebook, on your Twitter, etc., and to keep you in line. And part of that is so that people can feel morally superior. So today, I went on Twitter and I attacked 5 people for being too liberal. So today I've already gotten my pahala for the day. I've done my bit, right? So the thing is about, people talk about mainstreaming, about taking over the conversation, right? The problem here might be that, and I've spoken to Dato Saifuddin about this before when he was with GMM. GMM sounds a lot fancier than its full name, because in the full name there's the word moderate there. And moderate just kind of sucks. It's a very lukewarm term, and no one actually wants to be moderate, right? You want to be the best. You want to be radical. You don't want to be wishy-washy, in a sense. So that's where, so extremist is bad, right? There is negative connotations, but there's also negative connotations to being moderate, right? And maybe there might be a need to, well, in a little cluster like this, you can talk about being moderates. When you go out there and talk to people, you can't tell people, why don't you be more moderate? Why should I be more moderate? It's not cool. It's not nice, right? I'd rather be radical, you know. And for a short while back in the early 90s, radical was synonymous with cool, you know. There are so many other phraseology that you can go for. I mean, I think back in Park last time, he had this thing which was, he had a patriotic song which was, what? Cemerlang, Gemilang, Gebilang, and that sort of thing, right? It sounded great, right? You know, and terhilang, right? So many words you can use: modern, maju, progressive, smart, even, right? Successful. You don't want to be a jago kampung, you have to be jago dunia. You know, so many ways to talk about why. Well, these tenets of moderation are important for you to actually become better, right? And the last thing is that moderation itself and what it means is subject to its own violence, right, in this discourse. So if you want to take, one example being used quite often has been this whole beer festival thing, or Oktoberfest, or whatever it is. So we tend to think of it along one pole and one dimension, between those who say, oh, you should ban alcohol, blah, 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 so and so on, and the people who say we should bathe in alcohol, right? And somewhere in there is supposedly the moderate point, but moderation is multidimensional, right? And to an extent, the cabinet kind of understood that. So it removed itself from this line you draw between no alcohol and lots of alcohol to, oh, it's security reason, right? And that's why we cannot have the festival. So it changed the complexity of that problem, right, into one of security. And then how are you going to argue in a security context about we have to be moderate, right? Because the rational thing here is to save lives. Now, whether the security threat is real or not is different, right? But the rhetorical point that they've got there is really very hard to evade. And now, actually, the entire conversation is trapped in that point. Even Menteri Besar, he can't do anything now that the police permission has been, revoked, right? What's he can't do anything, he can't say anything, he just say, we just need to get all the approvals. We can't get the approval, how to go on, right? So you're stuck inside that new conversation. So, while I'm all just building up to on all these 3 points is that it is important to take control of the conversation.
Thank you, Shannon. We will come to the summing up by the 2 keynote speakers. We will do it the reverse. Can we have, Dato Beng first? Okay, Mujahid, thanks. And so we will work on your private bill. Yeah. Oh, before that, I must also recognize someone who just arrived, Raimi, just want to recognize ABIM President Raimi. Tuan Haji Raimi just came back from Hajj. Okay. Sila,
okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I won't have much time, so I'll respond to all the comments that have been made in a short way. In that I think the real victim of the communal politics that we've been having in Malaysia are actually the individual narratives, right? I do think that it's I mean, how often in a day do I walk around as a representative of a collective identity? I don't, right? I interact with people, and they are not representative of some other collective group either. And that's the reality of it. And yet our politics, our narratives tend to immediately jump to that racial context. And that's a very sad thing. It's been going on too long, and I suppose that's my point today, that let's get back to what our realities actually are, and they are not properly represented in how we talk. That would be my main point. Let me end what I wanted to say with my paper with another point that's always been of interest to me. I used to live in China quite a bit to study Confucianism, actually, among other things. Yeah. And one thing I noticed after studying it quite a lot, and many of you might know that Confucius was someone who actually said he was not prescribing behavior, he was just describing behavior. He was just discovering how people actually behaved. And so being a Confucian was not being Chinese, it was being a certain type of civilized human, right? And then after that, I've lived in many countries, and I noticed that in many countries, people behave like Confucianists. You see that in the UK, you see that in Ireland, you see that, I see a lot of that in the Malayu culture. It's very Confucian, but we don't call it that. Which brings me to my point that is part of this battle to be, that Dr. Mujahid was talking about, to be more Muslim than anybody else. And that usually just involves a certain way of talking, right? Now, we do know that a lot of people who are not Muslims behave in ways that Muslims would approve of, but they are not called Islamic behavior. So the battle has sort of become, for want of a better term, I would say there is a problem of a branding exclusivism going on in the world and in Malaysia, where it's about, if something good happens and it's not branded as Muslim or something, then it's not worth that label of being a good behavior. And I think that is a big problem, because that takes us away from our common humanity itself, which is that whatever our religion and background, we do as humans develop certain ways of behavior. Like Confucius would say, you can't get away from it. You meet, it's like two dogs meeting, you can't always fight. You work out a way of behaving. And then over time you get what you recognize as a certain culture, a certain way of behaving, and then you call it something. But that label itself should not take over. And so that behavior that is similar but called something else is certainly ranked as being lower, in some sense, inferior. I think that is a big problem. And I think one way to go for, in Malaysia, if we want more common dialogues, is to recognize that, to go for the essence of a behavior instead of what people choose to label it as. That would be the last point I want to make today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. John?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate and found it very educational to listen to everybody from the different perspectives. And of course, I'm not responding in a sense to people so much as to sort of absorb what is being said. And let me just say, I think of the problem as something at two levels. One is the level of the bigger picture of society, nation, state, and then groups. And we in Malaysia, I think, are an actually existing multicultural society or multicultural nation. We cannot escape from that. There are existential threats to that multiculturalism, as we all know. And it's pointed out by quite a few of you that we have veered away from what perhaps was already a multicultural practice, which was not so bad. I think Dr. Shaharuddin mentioned this. Wasatiyah, Islam Hadari, Bangsa Malaysia, we had all those things. However, we have veered away from that. And I think we must come back to the center. Centripetalism, consociationalism. Horowitz's point is well taken. Malaysia is not a true consociational democracy, but it has elements of it. And I think one of the elements that we must reintroduce, and I mentioned it quite a lot, in terms of bringing about institutional stability and institutional robustness, is the question of respect for minorities, respect for ethnicities or communities. Therefore, the mutual respect, mutual veto idea is very important. Yeah? Apart from the fact that you've got to have this proportionality and all that. And so centripetalism, I think, becomes, that's your favorite word too now, a kind of a guidepost, a guideline for us to introduce those kinds of practices. So that's at the very large level of nation state, communities, groups. I appreciate the point that has already been very well taken, and Beng has pushed the idea that things also need to be done at the individual level. I would add not just individual, but at the everyday level. You know, we interact with each other on an everyday basis. And I think at that level, I've mentioned it also in the presentation, we need to have more bridging rather than just bonding experiences and institutions. So that's where the individual comes into play. So unfortunately, again, we're veered very far. And we need some leadership, which is not there today. We need leadership to drive us back to this kind of middle ground where we have more bridging, interactions, organizations, civil society groups, etc., rather than encourage the other type of groups, which tend sometimes towards the extreme. So I think that's where we are at the moment, and if we can work towards that, I think Malaysia will still continue to be a very livable, very wonderful, multicultural society.
Thank you, Johan. Okay, I'm not going to attempt to do a summing up or a conclusion. I simply just want to make a few observation, or rather some points to take home, especially for our team at the center and at IDE. As I said at the outset, coming up with something, whatever you want to call it, fake, a ta'ayush on the one side of the coin, the other side of the coin, a new political thought, it's not something that is easily done. In fact, you don't actually do it this way, as you all know it. But we are doing it this way simply because we need to connect the dots. We need to connect the dots. I do not want to sound like Donald Trump, but to paraphrase Johan, it was there at one time. Yeah, we used to be very moderate. We used to understand multiculturalism, or whatever term that we are using. We need to revisit. We need to do it again and do it better this time. Leadership is something that we need to really look at. As far as IDE is concerned, as far as the center is concerned, I think we are working on that one. But it's not just at the theory level. We are not here to theorize. We do not want to compete with the two gurus here when it comes to political theory. But I think what we are looking at is something that is workable. Not necessarily in the form of model or configuration, which is probably too high up, but something that is workable, something that we can work on at our level, and something that we can translate into, well, promoting policies is one thing, but into real work, as I mentioned, the AYG, real work on the ground, and especially by the young. Number two is to continue with this platform of sharing of ideas, and looking at something that may sound politics to some people is, what are the incentives? Psychologically, people need incentive. Why the incentive to not be a racist? I'm not talking about BRIM, obviously, but there must be incentive. I mean, to put it in the political realm, a politician, if he or she stand in a mixed seat, the incentive is to be cross-ethnic, because the incentive is you can win election by becoming more cross-ethnic in the way you present yourself, your statements, and so on and so forth. But what about a candidate who stands in a predominantly Malay or Chinese or Indian? What is the incentive to be, for lack of a better way of expressing it, less Chinese, less Indian, less Malay? If I can put it in that manner, yeah. So, what is the incentive for AYG in the context of IDE to do this thing? Why this extra work to be multiracial? And so on and so forth. So, we are actually looking for working models, something that we can work on with clear desired outcome, inshallah. So, thank you so much for spending half of your day here. We will then move one staircase upward to Bumbung Shah Alam for lunch. I don't know what the menu is, but because we are a small organization, probably if you want a better lunch, the next program will be hosted by Penang Institute. Oops. Over to you, Saifuddin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating today. We are very honored to have you with us today. Please accept our apology for any shortcomings, the delay in starting the program this morning, or even the lunch, like Dato Saifuddin says, we serve what we can afford. Hopefully, the next round with Penang Institute. This is, I remember Dato Saifuddin was telling last time, this is part of our culture. Kita kena makan juga. But anyway, you just take a staircase, one floor upstairs is Bumbung Shah Alam. We'll have lunch there. Before that, I think they're asking for us to take a group photo before we adjourn for lunch.